Hey, Rentals Club members, thank you for joining us today. I'm with Rachel Tabellion. Rachel is the head of sales for HomeToGo. HomeToGo, as you may know, is a company that builds itself as the fastest growing booking channel for property managers. So we'll hear more about this because it may be, if you knew HomeToGo a few years back, it may be surprising to use a positioning. It actually is very interesting to see what a HomeToGo does. And a HomeToGo, as you may know, also has access to a trove of data about what's going on in the industry. And Rachel kindly agreed to be with us today to talk about a very thought-provoking report that she's put out together with AirDNA on the trends in the US. So we'll be commenting trends in the US, what's going on now, and also talk a bit about HomeToGo to get to know them a bit better. Without further ado, Rachel, hello and welcome.
Hey there. Hi, Thibaut. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. It's a pleasure. I'm very excited that we're going to take some time looking at the report.
So it's great to have you. And as I was saying, HomeToGo is on the consumer side, people may knew it as a comparison site where people can find a lot of options in terms of vacation rentals across the world and find what's best for them. And you pull data from all kind of different sources. But the way you present yourself, and that's very interesting to me, is that you are the fastest growing booking channel for property managers. So could you please explain to us, what this is about, and maybe also explain, by the way, what you do as a head of sales?
Sure. So indeed, we started 7 years ago, a bit more than 7 years ago, and I've been around for 6 years. So you can imagine that it's grown quite a lot. I've seen the company in very different phases, which is extremely exciting. When we started, we were, a handful of colleagues, and now we've grown into this international company. So it's super exciting. And indeed, as you said, Thibaut, we've also evolved in the way we, bring services to guests, but also to the industry, so to vacation rental professionals. We started pretty much as a meta search company. So, I think everyone is pretty much aware of that model. So that would be pulling data from the main vacation rental websites out there, comparing prices, comparing options. This is still something we do. So that's still a great tool for guests and travelers all around the world, being able to have a really vast choice in comparing the options. Throughout the years, though, we got asked very, very, very often by property managers, oh my God, that's awesome. Can I please list on your platform? Which wasn't possible a couple of years ago, some years ago, actually. So we started partnering with software partners, so channel managers, PMSs, to offer property managers the option and the possibility to list directly on HomeToGo, because they're just very, very eager to diversify their distribution strategy. And we've been very lucky to build very strong relationships with all the leading softwares out there. So what we offer now has evolved a little bit, and especially B2B, we are able to bring bookings, to bring volume and additional revenues to property managers. So that's what we offer, and we've seen amazing response really from potential partners out there, existing partners. And that's what we've been doing, not just in Europe actually, but also in the US.
Yeah, and to that point, Rachel, obviously HomeToGo is one of the, I would say, few successful travel startup companies in Europe. But you actually have, and we'll be talking about, data about the US because you have quite some presence in the US. That's very interesting. Can you tell us more maybe about the US side of the operations?
Sure. It's been amazing to actually see the response there, right? Because as you said, you guys can hear it. I am not American. Most of the team we have in Berlin and based in Berlin is not American either. And COVID came in between as well last year, obviously. So we also wanted to be a little bit more present on the ground there in the US, which couldn't happen. But nonetheless, even while being mostly remote, we're able to work with amazing new colleagues on the ground, grow the business there. Before COVID, we also participated in some events, just strengthen those relationships as well with property managers, with software partners there. And the response has been really positive because past the kind of, who are you? Are you European? What are you doing here? I think everyone has been very excited to again have a new booking platform they could use. And the fact also that we were probably the newbie back then also allowed us to build solutions that were very, very, very tailored to the needs of property managers and software partners as well. So we're able to be a bit more agile, in what we were put together, and maybe learn from what the industry was telling us in terms of, okay, I love that about booking platforms, or I really don't like this. So also being able to offer certain models that were very popular. And now that everything is reopening, we're also, ramping up our team on the ground. So be very excited to be joining again all the events, Verma, different summits when it comes to our software partners as well.
It's really fantastic to hear, because in a way you could argue that it means that it's a very humble attitude to say, well, maybe we, for example, in the US, we're not Americans, we need to learn more, to listen more, and to adapt and be agile. It's very, very interesting. And again, I think it really speaks to the Rentals Club audience, because we try to be cross-Atlantic and bring tell Europeans what's happening in the US, also bring to Americans maybe solutions that are born in Europe that are completely relevant to the US. So it's really a good fit. Speaking of the US, I did promise thought-provoking data, and obviously summer 2021 in the US is quite amazing, right? For a lot of people, it should be the best year ever. But really, it started already since January, right? We're looking at data in markets such as the coastal markets, rural markets, mountain markets. Month after month, it seems like it's been record breaking. And so you partnered with AirDNA, which is trusted the provider of vacation rental data. You partnered with AirDNA for this report about the US. It was striking to me that you were able to show things that was just things that are expected. For example, yes, your report shows really, really well how mountain, rural, countryside markets and seaside markets are booming, but you show that some cities actually able to get some bookings. So can you tell us a bit more about how you see urban demand coming back in the US?
Yeah, totally. I think since January it's been booming there in the US. It's been awesome for us as well, seeing that the US has stayed a very, very strong market, one of our top markets. And it's pretty nice because it also gives us a perspective into what is going to come to Europe, right? Once everything has reopened and everything has been lifted. So that's on the hopeful side. That's also for the European market. But yes, indeed. So I mean, obviously, especially throughout the pandemic, we've heard a lot about remote destination, kind of taking your distance, social distancing, and everything, which is awesome if you have a cabin right in the mountain. But if you're a property manager, you have an apartment in Miami, you might be like, okay, what's in there for me? So what we looked at indeed in this analysis with AirDNA was, okay, how actually are also urban bookings evolving? And we've seen actually a steady recovery on that front. So coming from 10% to now 50% of the bookings in the US market being from urban properties. So super encouraging, especially for the 4th of July. So we had a focus on the 4th of July, and we see many different cities being super popular, Orlando, Panama City, San Diego, and so on. So super, super hopeful also for all the property managers out there with urban properties. And we also wanted to understand, okay, why is that? So obviously, the restrictions being lifted, obviously vaccination being on a really, really good track in the US, definitely having a huge influence on the willingness, for travelers to be more crowded destinations. So that's definitely super important element. But what we looked at as well, and I think that's even more interesting, and I think come to that probably a bit more detail later, but when it comes as well to the business side of renting a vacation rental. So typically our industry has been doing really well for vacationers, and it wasn't necessarily the option for business travels. But with the pandemic, it has emerged that actually vacation rentals are a pretty good option as well, also if you want to do business travel. And what we're seeing is that in those cities specifically, yes, you do vacation, but you also travel for business in those cities, right? And as other industries are reopening, we're also expecting those business travels to happen again. And there is a huge opportunity for industry actually to position ourselves also, in catering for the needs of business travelers. So that's also trend that we've seen, and where we know property managers are very eager actually to capture that. So a mixture of vacation bookings for urban rentals plus also business travels coming back.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? Big cities like San Diego, Miami are coastal destinations, but also big cities and do have business centers. Speaking of, you talk about how basically the crisis also help people discover new use cases for vacation rentals in cities. And it makes me think of what Brian Chesky of Airbnb said a couple of weeks back, is that basically, in this case, some people are discovering that Airbnb also has new use cases. Airbnb was mostly about, booking an urban stay for 2 people. And now basically what they say is that people are using Airbnb, just like basically they use Verbal, which is to book a larger place for their family. And the result is that, larger places, maybe in more expensive markets, especially with shortage of supply, means that there's really big increase in the ADR, so the average daily rate. Also in overall booking value, which is more expensive to book. So is it something you've seen as well, this increase, let's say, in ADR booking value? This is something you see in your own data, Rachel?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting that you picked that up, because when we released a white paper with Airbnb, that was because they have amazing data when it comes to ADR specifically. So it was super nice to actually visualize that using their tool. And we had a thorough discussion in one of our webinars exactly about that point. So that's definitely something we're seeing. I would say from the type of guests that we bring, that HomeToGo brings as the channel, we are more on the family side of personas, right? So we do have also maybe bookings for weekends and so on, but you're more looking at travelers traveling as a family, group of friends, longer stays anyway, kind of by the essence of the kind of booking platform we are anyway. But nonetheless, even though we were already seeing rather longer stays in general on HomeToGo, no matter pandemic or no pandemic, we've seen them increase even more. And yes, we're seeing several trends about that. So an explanation. So obviously there are some unused vacation days. So everyone is kind of, catching up and booking longer stays. But we're also seeing indeed families and larger families coming back together, who couldn't see each other for some time. So instead of just going with your wife and your kids, and you would maybe go with your uncle and then aunt, and then kind of have this big gathering all together. So that's definitely something we're seeing. We're also seeing that there is money that has been saved as well on vacation that now guests and everyone is very eager to spend. So why not indulge yourself with a larger house, just a bit more premium than your budget usually allows you. That's also something we're seeing. And in general, we're also seeing, and it's something we're seeing in Europe, by the way, as well, where maybe the pandemic is still very, very present, is the fact that the property has become the destination. So, instead of, going to a destination, you actually search for the most amazing place you can get for your budget. And you just indulge yourself with a super awesome villa. Again, because maybe you're a larger group of friends, but also because you're not quite sure if everything is going to be completely reopened in the neighborhood. So you want to make sure, at least if we stay at the place, then we're going to have a really, really amazing time, maybe with a pool, or I don't know, like a broader outdoor space. So it's definitely something we've seen. And again, it's pretty hopeful, and we're seeing as well some bookings already for 2022. Also longer stays, also traveling again a bit farther away. So you can't just go for a weekend. You also have to take into account the travel time. So you stay longer as well.
So Rachel, you mentioned longer stays, and that's very interesting. A point is that last year, for example, the demand for short stays collapsed, right? So all that was left, I would say, in the data was like long stays. So people were like, oh, long stays are booming. It's a new trend. Yeah. And I was skeptical, right? I would raise my hand and say, yes, I was skeptical. I was like, long stays are a big share of your business because the rest just collapsed, just non-existent. So, and I must say, right, I was wrong, because it kind of looks like this year too, we have long stays. Of course, COVID is not gone. People are still, concerned about it. And there's still good reasons, for example, to book longer stays. As you said, right, people save the vacation days and money they can afford to book longer stays. But it's still happening. It may even happen, be here to stay. So again, what do you think is happening with these long stays? Why are people using this? And you say that, of course, you have property managers using your platform. So how can they really, for example, use your platform to be able to catch this wave of longer stays?
So your point about the statistical element is super important, because indeed, if one would compare, year over year, especially at the start of the year, the beginning of the year, it's very biased, because you kind of have all those longer stays already planned in advance, versus towards the end of the year, you have the number of short-term kind of weekend stays that increase, right? So the average kind of, if you measure it at the end of the year, would just kind of fluctuate. So I think it's a really good point, because you can't just compare like year over year and be like, oh my God, we had 50% more, right? So it needs a caveat on it. But nonetheless, you're absolutely right. We do still see like bookings happening that are on average longer than usual. So it's here to stay. And for me, there are two probably main points that property managers can really look at, and strategies. I'd say on a more data kind of setup of your booking channel front, super important to really make sure, in terms of max stays, any restrictions you might have in place. And that's also true for short-term, for last-minute stays, by the way. We haven't talked about that today, but any kind of restrictions, right, that are in place, minimum, maximum stays, please look into that as a property manager and make sure, you are flexible as possible. Flexibility is also to be found in the cancellation policy. So the higher your booking value, the more cautious you become as a guest, about cancellation. And hey, if I'm going to spend twice as much, I also want to make sure if anything happens, I get some kind of refund. So flexibility is also something super important that guests are still actually mentioning in their top two when it comes to decision making when booking. So keep that in mind as well, super important. But now when it comes to persona, I think that's super exciting, because we touched about that already today. Those longer stays, who books them as well? Well, again, we're back to workation, we're back to remote workers. And this mixture of, now many companies are actually becoming very flexible when it comes to working from home or working from anywhere, by the way. So why actually, just kind of leave on a Saturday and come back on the Sunday and then have to go back to work? You can extend, right? You can just spend 2 weeks in the same place, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, and enjoy this for work as well. Okay, so how do you capture that as a property manager? Well, you capture those remote workers with three things. You need to make sure you have the right amenities. You need to make sure these are properly reflected in the description, and you need to reflect all of that in your pictures as well. Right amenities being pet friendly, for instance. Your property being pet friendly is important, because if you go as a pet owner for a week, okay, you're going to find a pet sitter. Go for 3 weeks, it starts being a real budget. So, bringing your pet with you, for instance, is something that it's a big differentiator as well for some properties. And the second one, I think we're all very much aware of that. Today, again, you and I, Thibaut, internet connection. So making sure it's not about having the little Wi-Fi icon, right? It makes a huge difference, like having a shabby internet connection and having a strong one where 2-3 people can, at the same time, be on Zoom.
Several people working from home at the same time,
right?
Same connection. Yes, that could be
doing what we're doing today, not being like frozen and interrupted. So don't assume as a property manager, it's taken for granted by guests. No, it's down the other way around. If they don't see it, they're going to assume it's not there. So put that in your amenities, make sure it's reflected on your booking channel, reflected on your pictures. Literally taking a picture of your router or whatever. And you can do those test speed as well. Do a screenshot of a test speed at home, and you have a proof that, hey, it's super, super strong. And reflect that in your description. Comfortable setup, a desk chair, a desk, quiet place where you can have your call, and each of the guests can have calls and things like that. So, really positioning your property for those remote workers is super important, and you're gonna for sure capture longer bookings with that.
Fantastic. Rachel, thank you so much for the insights, and I think it's very just sharing data, but very lively. So if people want to find more about the company or more about the report, what's the best way? what should they be doing?
So you go to our website. If you're excited to connect with us because you're a property manager, there is a form on the Become a Partner page. You can just reach out to us using this and ask your questions, and we're going to be very happy to help you. If you're interested about the data, we also have a dedicated page for that, a travel page. Go there, download the white paper, and again, reach out if you have any questions. We're excited to get your feedback as well. What's useful, what's not useful, and what would you like to see in the next edition, maybe?
Thanks a lot. So Rachel Tabellion, you're the head of sales of HomeToGo. Once again, thanks for the insights and have a great day.
Merci Thibaut. Bye everyone. Thank you.